So now we're going to be looking at the fourth step, which is baking. Here is my beetle. He is on a tray that I specifically use for my sculptures. Do not use anything that you use with food. And my oven is set to 160 degrees. Make sure your oven is preheated before putting the sculpture in. It gives it the best chance to not crack while cooking. Into the oven he goes. Now for the baking instructions, do not follow the instructions that are on the Sculpey box. You will burn your work. On the box it says to do about 275. That's way too hot, and you can bake your work better if you do lower and slower. So you can set your oven between 150 to 170 degrees. That depends on the thickness of your sculpture and if you're going to bake it several times or not, because you can bake Sculpey and then add more, sculpt on it, and bake it again. So because in this particular sculpture, I decided that I was going to bake this once because I was done with my sculpture, and it was thin, but still thick enough to the point where I wanted to make sure it was cooked. I did 160 degrees for an hour and a half. Now, if your sculpture is thicker, you might want to do 170 degrees. You might want to do longer. It's honestly very dependent. Better safe than sorry, and it's better to do longer than not as long. When it comes to the baking, make sure that you bake for at least an hour. You can do an hour and 30 minutes or more. I usually just stop at an hour and 30 minutes, but I would suggest for you to check on it every 30 minutes, and do not be afraid if you see that the clay still feels soft if you touch it while it's in the oven, because when the clay gets warm, it gets soft. Now, this being said, keep in mind that if you put a piece of clay in the oven that doesn't have any armature wire, or is just a loose piece of clay, it will bend and droop because of the warmth of the oven. After that, just let it sit in the oven and let it cool down with the oven. This results in less chance of cracking because it cools down slowly instead of being put into a completely different temperature abruptly. Here you can see that I am leaving my oven open, and I'm going to leave that open until it's completely cooled down. And that's basically it. After that, you can go ahead and go to the next step, which is painting, and that's going to be the next video.